and I'm just always grateful whenever you come. I wanted to talk to you today specifically about a live that I did. In this particular live, when we were talking about what's going on in the land, and as far as how the social service system and the school systems and all the other systems are coming together, and they're all making the same concern. They're all saying that they're concerned that Black children, Israelite children, are in the home and that they're being abused, and they're expecting this big onslaught. Now, keep in mind, we're only making up 14% of the population, if that. And yet, we are the only part of the population that the government is putting out a concerted effort to come in and address the abuse issues. And so, my first question would be, how do they so know? How is it that they know beyond a doubt that these things are going on, so much so till they're already getting legislation, they already getting funding, they already have all these things in place to come in and rescue the children who are at home with the parents. They have people who are trying to get the COVID 19 money, some of that sent into the area of to address the issues of the child psychology, returning to school, abuse issues, hunger issues, trauma issues in specifically the Negro community. So, how are we going to deal with it was one of the things that I asked. But the other question is, how do they know? How do they know for certain? See, there was a time when the European Americans discovered that if Black folks are left alone, they used to say that if we left by ourselves, we would just self destruct, right? We'd kill ourselves. So, because they believed that we would harm ourselves, we couldn't feed ourselves, we wouldn't do well on our own, they had this whole paternal, that masterism. They had the idea that we needed to be mastered by someone else. And under the mindset of masterism, that's when a person is totally and completely in error, where they are perfectly deceived into thinking that Negroes cannot do without them. That's what you call perfect deception. So, in the course of history, they would leave Black folks off to themselves in different areas of the country, little what they call Black townships, and they were expecting to come back and find us basically totally lawless, clueless, and really aggression. I mean, just aggression all over the place and hurt and harm, self afflicted harm, basically in our own communities, in our own lives. When they would leave us alone, we would begin to build. We would begin to build cities and townships. You probably heard of Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street is just one. That's the one that's gotten a little bit of publicity. But when you hear about the fact that here in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, how that was a town that was really a powerful economic force and beautiful things there was happening. There was about three different towns just in the Carolinas alone that was set on fire by their own countrymen, which were white American Southerners. Then you go to like places like New York, and you find out that there is a big park there that used to be a Black town. And they went in and they killed up the people, they took the land and turned it into a national park. They everywhere that the Black folks was left alone, they would do well and they would flourish and prosper. So there is no history in America of us being left alone and harming ourselves until we start looking at the definite in what they're saying is going on now. They're not saying it's a guess, it's definite. The way they are putting people in place and they're lining up things, this is something that they say is a sure deal. So, how do they know for certain In Nazi Germany, Hitler sent in the sociologists. He sent in the people to study the behavior of the folks, to find out what all of their Achilles heels were, just like in the word in the Bible, where when there were some people who could not overcome Israel in war, and they couldn't figure out how come they couldn't overcome them. They said because they have a God. And this particular God that they have, he continues to give them victory over and over and over. They serve a God who will never let them be defeated. And so what they did was they began to study Israel. And they said one of the things about Israel people is that they have this tendency that if you give them a woman, if you give them women from outside who worship like Molech and all these other gods, who are also very much into the marine kingdom as far as the being masters of seduction, and to get them to go in and seduce these men and introduce them to paganistic sexual practices. And once they get involved in those practices, it will cause their God to have to turn from them, because he is a just God and he is a righteous God, and he won't back them up in those types of circumstances and situations. The people of Israel went on about their business. And then they kept acting like everything is status quo, is normal. And so when these other folks begin to come into their community and study them and figure out how to plant things in their community to get them to have basically an Achilles heel, or to have a default that the Father could not overlook, that Yahweh could not overlook. And this created a situation where the enemy kept coming in and being able to advance against the Israelites until he was able to just take them captive over and over again. The enemy, the word says that when we have certain things going on, the enemy can come in. He puts his hooks in us. We're talking about this hook thing. And he puts not only his hooks in us in the laws of the land, but he put his hooks in us emotionally and spiritually and behaviorally. And so whenever he wants to come in and do anything he want to do, just like they used to would, I would hear some of the regional managers tell the evaluators, find us a hook. We need a hook in them. Because we have to be able to grab that hook and take these people captive at will, to take them into regions of captivity, to get them to do whatever we want them to do, be it sell out and leave the Most High, receive an injection that will change your total DNA genetic structure, that you don't even know what's in it, to get them to blaspheme through music, through behavior, get them into any type of blasphemous practice, because this is the only way we can help the kingdom of darkness to overcome and overshadow them in everything that they do and in every area of their lives. So now they're saying to us, we know for certain that we have to arm social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, drug therapists, all these addiction counselors, because sexual abuse people, because these children, Hebrew, Israelite, Negro children, have not been in the public's eye. And they've been away from us for so long, but we know that these things are going on. How do they know for certain? 400 years of programming. When they saw us get stable and begin to cry out to the Father, and they saw the blessings of Yahweh abounding, they knew that if they do things externally to us, we could get back on our moral axis and we could turn our face back to the Most High, and we will begin to cry out for help and deliverance. So they knew we must get something that's going to be so deeply embedded that it'll become an internal altar, something that these people will worship. And one of the things that we love is music. And when you see how our music have been so twisted and perverted, and now that music it puts something in us. Sometimes I'm gonna tell you, even with me, I'll hit a mood, and all of a sudden, if I come up against certain frustrations, it's like there's a certain kind of music that will move me. It'll kind of make me feel a little better. It's almost like medication. The enemy has given us his form of emotional barbiturates, and we've become very addicted to these barbiturates. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about my own personal barbiturate. And it started as a very, very young girl, as a child, probably a baby. I can't even remember where it started. And I had a person in my life, and he was a grown man, and he was not my biological father. And as a baby, this man, he coddled me, he comforted me, he was always there for me. He was a guy who had gone through the Vietnam War. And during the Vietnam War, and a lot of the different wars, World War II, World War One, World War II, I remember hearing my mother and my aunties and uncles and stuff talking about certain family members of ours who had been in those wars. They said when they came home, they would have what they call DDT fits. I never knew what the DDT stand for, but I know it was a fit. And so they would pull everybody away from that person while they were going through this um, behavior. And basically, it was really demonic activity, but they would call it a DDT fit. Something had happened in them where they wasn't able to resist Satan physically anymore. And so they would have these fits. Now we have something called PTSD, and we understand it to be post traumatic stress disorder. When this person who the father put in my life, I felt like he had put him in my life at the time. I didn't know no better. I was just a baby. And when he was having one of these fits, and everybody else was like getting back and watching and side eyeing him, get the children back, get the children back, something wrong with him, get the children back. But this man had always been good to me. And so I didn't understand any type of abuse or threat from him. And so one of my uncles, I kind of looked at him and told him, "You better, take a break. Get on somewhere. Go in the woods. Go do something." Because we were stopped. We were actually stopped at a roadside. We were taking a road trip, and our family was headed to Texas when this thing came over him. And so when all this stuff was going down, I remember how he was going off into the woods, and I can remember the whole family just shunning him. They were like, "Get him back. Get him away from us. Get him away from us." And I recall him walking away by himself, and I just went. And he told me this story up until he died. And I went and I grabbed he said he felt something wrap around two of his fingers. Now, mind you, I'm like about maybe 3 years old at this time, two, three, 3.5. And so he said he felt something wrap around two of his fingers. And he looked to see what it was, and he lifted his hand and he saw his fingers, but he said he saw these other two little fingers. He said he saw this little fist wrapped around his fingers. He said, and he looked down at the face. He said, and it was me. He says, and I looked him in the eye and told him, "Don't worry, Roy. I'm going to take care of you. I'll take care of you. Don't be afraid." And he said at that moment, he said he couldn't help but start to cry. And he pulled his hand away from me, and he knew I could hear all of my mom and my "Get back here, get back here." And they were trying to call me away from my dad. And so he said, "Go back." He said, "I'm okay." He said, "Go back with them, go back with them." He insisted that I went back. And I remember I was a smart child. I was young, I could talk, but I was really smart too. And I remember thinking, don't leave him. We can't leave him out here, because we were on a road trip. We were in some strange state. We were at the side at a rest stop. And all I could think was, don't leave my dad, don't leave Roy here in this place. I kept like, we can't leave Roy. We can't leave Roy. I just kept just repeating that to everybody. We can't leave Roy, because they were saying, we've been out here all this long. We're tired. We're ready to go, because we were really waiting on him for a very, very long time. And then finally, someone went to locate him in the woods and make sure he was okay, and asked him, can you please come back? We can finish our road trip, and then you can do whatever you want to do once we get you to town. If you want to get on a bus or something and go back to Portland, Oregon, you can. But let's get you someplace besides out here on the side of the road. He agreed. He came, he got back in the vehicle, and we went along our way. That encounter forged something between he and I. Coming from the city, I didn't know anything about Texas and some of the types of things that went on in the South behaviorally directed towards children. Not saying that this stuff don't go on in the North, but I hadn't been exposed to it by people in the North. I had been around other family. I had been around people up north, but as far as I know, I had not been exposed to some of the sexual deviant behaviors of the adult males from the South. Not saying all Southern men have this issue, but that was my first exposure. And not understanding the territory of where I was at, my dad kept me close to him. And so people would look at him and they would be like, well, what's he doing with her? Why is she always hanging on him? Why is she always in his lap? Why is she always on his side? Why is this little girl always with this man who's not her father? The concern was justifiable. But he was the one man who could hold me and cradle me all day long. And there was never, at the time, there was never any abuse. I never knew him to do anything to harm me. I remember when I can tell you a lot, but I'm going to move forward. And then, he was always there. And so when we came back from the South and we came up north, and come to find out that wasn't a DDT fit. He wasn't going through anything PTSD. He was actually having an emotional experience. And if you get the book, I will tell you, I will explain in it how my dad had actually had a premonition and he saw something. Even though he was away from the state of Oregon, he actually saw something. And what he saw was very real. So, but we eventually came back to Oregon. And finally I was able to go to school. And when I started going to school, school wasn't easy for me. It was like I was one of those children that got picked on. Children learn to bully you real early. Like they learn bullying in kindergarten and in first and second grade. So I would get picked on. And my dad, when I would come home from school, all I wanted to see was him because he could pick me up like he always did. Anytime I was having a hard time, my dad would pick me up and he would always just hold me. And he would always I remember him kissing me. He would just kiss my face. He would always kiss the back of my neck. He kissed the top of my head. He always kissed both my elbows. He would kiss my feet. And he would take me and he would pull me up in a fetal position, and my dad would just hold me there until I would fall asleep. Going through school, I would just have some days was good, but my dad, he kept his work schedule so that when I got out of school, when I walked through that door, I would see him sitting right there in the chair. He'd usually be sitting on the sofa. And if I needed to just sort of get that wash moment or whatever they call it, or if I just needed to decompress, I could hop right on him and my dad would just hold me and he would just give me his comfort, and then he would let me know how precious I was to him. It's something about a little girl who wants to be, you want to know that you're precious. Not just that you're tolerated, that you're liked, but that you're actually precious. Oh, blood of Yeshua, excuse me. That you want to know that you're precious. So My dad would always hold me. And then I began to grow up. I got to the stage that I was prepubescent, and I would still have bad days. And I still wanted to sit on my dad's lap. Without fail, I wanted to sit on his lap. My mom and my aunt began to tell me, he's not your daddy. He's not your daddy. And I'd get so hurt. I'm like, why would you tell me that he's not my daddy? This man has been the man who's been here for me my whole life, cooking, cleaning, washing my clothes, tucking me in my bed in the bed at night, giving me bedtime stories, making sure that I had baths. He was the man who had been there doing all kinds of nurturing things to me. And not once had he touched me in any kind of way that would even remotely seem sexual or sensuous, that could hurt me in any way, not once, as a young child. Now here I was prepubescent. I'm growing up. And I still craved this man's lap. I own that lap. That I'm going to sit here and I'm going to get comfy with you. You're going to rock me to sleep. And when I wake up, you're going to be done laid me on the couch. You're going to be done tucked me in, and that's going to be it. And so one day I came home from school. I was having a rough day. My dad was sitting on the sofa. And I walked over to him to get in his lap. And my dad looked at me when I walked through the door. He got up. And he went and got a chair, much like this one. My dad set the chair, a single chair, a dining table chair, in the middle of the floor, and he sat down. And he looked at me. There was no place for me to sit on either side of him where I could crawl up next to him or anything. He just sat there. And I'm like, well, I don't have no place to sit, so I'm going to really have to sit on your lap today. I don't get to lay on your shoulder. I don't. So I start trying to sit on my dad's lap. And he crossed his legs and he put his arms over his lap. So I start trying to uncross his leg and unfold his arm. And he and I got into a fight because he would not let me sit on his lap. We fought. Now, see, that was one of the things. It used to be if I fought him, my dad he'd put me in a bear, he would just hug me like this, and he wouldn't let me go. And then he would sit me on his lap, and he would just hold me there until I went to sleep. No matter how I fought him, he was just deflecting the blows, but he would not let me sit on his lap. I was so angry and so mad. I was so frustrated. I just finally went upstairs. The next day I went to school. When I came home, he didn't get up from the couch. He was already sitting in the chair. I walked over to him. He just gave me this look like, and so I rubbed up against him. He didn't respond. Finally, this went on for like a couple of days, maybe a few days, 2 or 3 days or whatever. And I got the message that he was never, ever going to let me sit in his lap again. At the time, what I didn't understand was that I was developing as a young lady. I was prepubescent. And at that stage, and I didn't realize this until way later on, until a friend of mine whose stepdad had raised her, her mom died. And then her stepdad came into her to do whatever he wanted to do. And there was no place in my mind for my dad being that type of a man towards me. And my friend was saying it was the same thing with her. There was no place in her mind, in her reasoning ability of him being that type of a man towards her, because he had only been a good stepfather. My dad, who babysat us all the time when my mother went out and she had things to take care of. My dad was always there. Whenever he wasn't at work, he was right there with us children. He did not touch me. And when I began to develop into a young girl or teen, I'm going into those years now, my dad knew his own temperament. He knew who he was as a man. Therefore, he did not put himself in a situation or in any type of way to where he could look at me in a sensual way. He didn't let me rub up against him. He didn't let me sit on his lap. He wouldn't let me snuggle with him on the sofa anymore. And when he saw me, it would be real simple. Hey, Goose baby, what you doing? And then he took it to a place where it became where he always sat in a chair. And so I got a chair and I would sit next to him and he and I would have dialogue. I could talk about my day. I could explain to him what's all going on. And he was a listener. He was there to hear me. And because he talked me through so many things, but he never, ever succumbed. He didn't let himself succumb to his flesh. He resisted. Even when it got to the point where it hurt me, I was totally heartbroken. But he knew the boundaries that he had to set for me and for himself. And as the adult, he chose to set those boundaries. Therefore, I remained safe in his presence. I remained loved and respected and adored in his presence. He did not shut off the adoration. He did not shut off the love. He did not shut off the communication. He put the boundary in place. He knew what to do. Now, here in this day and age, where we have so much child sexual abuse going on, where the boundaries, where they're talking about, children have what they call age fluidity. Well, you got young girls who act like they're older. You got older men who think that they're younger. You got young boys who's acting older. You got older women who think they're younger. And so now you're getting all of this stuff, this whole hodgepodge of stuff all mixed up with so much liberal tendencies and thinking and in all of the fraternization that's going on. And now they're saying, you know what? We've taken young Israelite children, girls in particular, from starting them off at the age of 8 years old in what they're calling health classes. We've opened up their understanding to sensual things that they never should have been exposed to. For instance, taking a cucumber and putting a condom over it and showing a little girl how to put a condom on a full cucumber, which would be the replica of a grown man's penis. So you're teaching little 8-year-old girls how to play with a grown man's scrotum. Now you have all of these things going on. And let's say, for instance, you sexualize this child through music. You done taught her how to pop her, you know what, and back it up like this and flop it on them like that. And so you done been teaching them all of this stuff. And now you're saying they're locked in an environment and they cannot escape it. So when that child goes into this grown up stuff, or maybe it's the grown man who's been looking at this child, or the grown woman who's been looking at this child and has been grooming them. Because see, some people would have looked at what my dad was doing as him grooming me. He's hugging you, he's kissing you, he's snuggling with you, he's loving on you, he's doing all of these emotional paternal and maternal things that is definitely loving and affectionate in nature. And we all know that most of the time, for most people, sexual intimacy is the highest level of bonding and touching communication that you can have with a person. So, with all of this stuff going on, he's grooming me. In the instance when my father, when my dad said in his own mind, she's growing up, no matter what she is, she's a child. No matter how much she wants to sit on my lap and be hugged and touched, she's a child. Whether his child or not, I was not his child, but whether his child or not, she's a child. And because I know I am a grown man, I am the responsible one in this situation. Therefore, I will do what grown men do, and I will be accountable to myself if nobody else will hold me accountable. Because, see, it wasn't like I had a whole lot of men in my family, like people around just watching my dad and trying to protect me from abuse. There was a lot of abuse. My dad was the one who pretty much protected me. So, with everything being that it was, he was not the one who furthered my innocent need for touching, communication, loving, kindness, warmth. He did not let that get confused. And even if I would have ever permitted it to get confused in my own mind, he kept me straight with him. Now, whatever anybody else did to me, that was them. But as far as my daddy went, that man never touched me in any kind of way to harm me, not a day in my life. And when he could not deal with me being all over him, he did the fatherly, he did the manly thing, like a true man would do, who have any kind of moral compass. So now the enemy knows that he has broken down the compasses of so many people in our community. He's worn down our consciousness. He's made us almost to be as reprobate as anybody else. See, the devil knows what he's doing. When our little girls and boys are being taught experiential, so-called sexual or health, when they're being taught it in an experiential way, in the white schools, like I told you, they're teaching them abstinence education. So they are protecting their children where they in the school systems whereas they are exposing ours to anything that they want to expose them to. Now, I'm going to go a little bit further here. And I want to talk to you about the different types of child exploitation. Sometimes it happens between clergy or spiritual or ritualistic abuse. Sometimes we're looking at it in the form of just plain old grooming to manipulate and then taking advantage of a child. Sometimes it's just outright assault and rape. There's different forms of sodomy and all these different types of petting. All that going on, okay? When it shouldn't be. When it's wrong to do that. As we begin to look at ourselves and we say, okay, well, they're getting ready to, they already talking about what they're going to do. Miss Jaretha, you're here telling us that all of this extra fondling and playing and wrestling and stuff that people do when they're at home with their children and off, whatever. There's a limit to it. There should be some barriers. There should definitely be some sort of a checkpoint, some things in place. And when their children are at home by themselves, there's nothing in place. Therefore, what are you saying, Miss Jaretha? I'm saying that everything that Satan has used to tear down all of our natural, spiritual guards, every single gateway that we had put in place. The enemy, he has been working to wear it down in this society. And once it gets to the place that we don't know how to discern good from evil, or we don't even care to put the brakes on ourselves. Some of us, we just, some people just go for it. It's like something's wrong. It ain't right for you to do that, but you still will continue to submit yourself to it and keep walking in it. In the military, they have something called a battle buddy. When these folks come into these homes, once these children get back in school, they're going to see a whole lot. But you say, what can we do to protect before this thing happens? Because we know what they're looking for, and we know what to look for in our own communities. We know how to be able to guard our own households, our own children, and we also know how to become a battle buddy to a child, letting the child know, look, I'm here for you. And sometimes those children will never come and tell you what happened because of the threats from parents, people at home. You better never tell. But we have to know how to become a battle buddy and stand guard to fight for the children. And not just that, but I remember growing up with some young girls who had been sexually abused quite often. And these same little girls became so hard, they become such hard fighters. I mean, these little girls could fight. When I tell you they could take on a grown man and literally do some damage, I saw them in the street where they would have to fight a grown man. And they knew how to fight. They knew how to defend in place. They knew how to fight and get on away from them. They knew how to talk loud, talk stuff, yell and scream. They knew proper assault protocol, which the word tells us how to teach. If you are under assault, you yell and you scream. You don't just sit there and let people hurt you or do things to you. You have to teach your sons and daughters to yell and scream. Don't just take assault. Get up and help yourself. Teach them how to do something. And if they're children who are too intimidated, if you are an adult who are around, you need to be accountable for that child's safety. You need to do what you have to do. Meaning, if you got to become a battle buddy, if you got to become a reporter yourself, call in and report. Do what you have to do. Don't wait for them to have to go to school to get some help. This ain't about them going to school, because you know what? If you call and get them some help as a family member, they will see that there is family who's active enough in that child's life to give them some help. To where when it comes to the point where if they need to put this child in foster care, go with another family member who believes the same way that you're going to believe, or who will take your advice and listen to you. If you say, I don't want them getting certain medical treatment, I don't want them getting this, that, and the other thing, that child is not necessarily a ward of the state, but they're now in the custody. They are now at your ward as a family member. So we as family need to start saying, all right, let me examine this thing. Because I may have to become a battle buddy. I may have to go to the front line in the natural for my child or for some children. And I got to be prepared to do it. So help me, Yeshua. Now, on the other hand, there are some things that happen that are so slick. Some people think they're so slick, they ain't gonna never get caught. And this is why you need the eye of the Spirit of Yahweh, the eye of the Ruach, the Holy Ghost. You need it. You need to be able to see into things spiritually as a seer, to translate actions and activities that normally wouldn't be picked up on or caught. And then you need to be able to go into the spirit and assault the enemy. You need to begin to pray those prayers. Yahweh, your word said that if anybody offend the least of these little ones. It is better for him to have a millstone tied around his neck than to be cast into the sea. Father, I loose and I come into agreement with your word. Let that millstone be placed, Yahweh, according to your word, according to your wisdom. Father, your word said, vengeance is yours, you shall repay. Father, I ask that you will avenge the children in my household and in my family in the name of Yeshua. You begin to take those prayers and begin to put this into action. And you begin praying against those who you know are hurting children during this season. And you let the Almighty Creator take them into the places that He chooses to take them into. If you can't see what's going on, but you suspect, you let Him begin to come in and unravel and unfold and unveil whatever is going on. Unveil whatever is going on behind the closed doors with His judgment. Father, bring your judgment fire in and let it sleep. Judge every person who's here who would dare bring harm or hurt or offend a young one. In the name of the resurrected Yeshua. You begin seasoning your environment with those kinds of prayers. Your battle bud needs you. Your child, the children in your family or in your world become their battle bud in prayer. As the Heavenly Father reveals to you, don't be no punk about calling them on the carpet, calling in the police, calling in CPS, calling in anybody you need to call in to get some help. I'm going to continue. We talked about adult child. Now we're going to talk about child to child. Some children are exposed to things, and those children become the manipulators and the predators. When they get in and expose other children, and they bring them into their mess. Some children are totally innocent, don't know nothing about being in the freak of the week, and then another child who might have been exposed via television. These children got so much exposure until it don't make no sense to be a parent, be a whatever. And as soon as your child get to sit down and tell somebody that they've been sexually active, they have some, it's called a sociogram or a sociogram. When one child is abused, they will find out who all that child was connected with, all the other children that was connected in that circle, and then whatever other adults and other children and other adults and other children, and that web goes out. And they begin to start searching out who done what, how, why, and to whom. And this is how you can get CPS that can come in and just sweep up all the children that's been connected with one particular group of people or organization or whatever. They can just come in. If it's a church situation or whatever, and one or two children come back and say, Deacon so-and-so did this, and if everybody in that church don't come forward and start cooperating and signing your children up and doing whatever, you could be in a situation where the majority of your children will be removed. That is possible. They'll call it an occult, of course. They will definitely call it an occult situation, but they will get to removing those children. The other one is child or teenager or child to younger child. When you have an older person who ought to know better, who really for all intents and purposes know that they can outwit, outmaneuver, and overpower somebody younger than them, there's no room for protecting that person. They cannot be protected. You should not protect them. The same way you would deal with an adult. Put them out there and let things be dealt with. With the Native American community, they have certain guidelines. They stepped up and they work with the state. They say, all right, you say you got some concerns about Native American children. We are more concerned about Native American children than you could ever be. Just like we as Israelites and as Negroes, we are more concerned about Negro children than anybody else could ever be. They have the social work department almost fully operated by Black folks, by Negro people who've been trained to implement their policies. And they've been trained to do to Negro families what they want them to do. And so when the Black social workers and caseworkers and the Black social worker management come in, you think you're dealing with Black folk. You think you're dealing with Israelites. You think you're dealing with something that remotely is going to favor you. You are dealing with them within their system. They just happen to hire some Negro people to carry their weapons for them, or carry their laws for them, or carry their whatever. When you get to the point where you know, okay, I respect the fact that you're a social worker, and I know you got to do your job. And quit looking at them thinking, okay, well, I'm going to really work with you because you're Black and I'm Black, or you're Israelite and I'm Israelite, and we can work together because we have a cultural understanding. That person has to do what they're told to do. And no matter how they try to say that they make things culturally relevant, they are taking in what you call the so-called the scholarians, or I'm trying to think of the other word, the boule. They're taking in these folks and they're getting with the laws, and they're saying we're creating something for who. They're not even talking about poor people and how and how they might come to the table and assist, but the poor people and how they can be have the laws can be put upon them. But the wealthy people are the ones who's coming in, sitting down, coming to the board meetings, and they're the ones, just like in Europe, how they would go and attack the peasants' children, and how the so-called royals and all of the so-called elite, they would go and they would seek out where the peasants' houses were, and they would go into their houses at night. That's where the story of Count Dracula comes from. Because he used to actually go in and kill peasant children at night. These people haven't heard really from folks who not so much the social workers they're calling on the front line, but I'm talking about like just the regular people who have to live through this stuff, but who haven't taken the time to put together anything. The common folks will have to come together. The common Israelites will have to come together. The common Hebrews, the common Negro, who ain't working for the government, will need to come together to construct an approach to how they want to have the government deal with their community. And yes, they've been coming up with this. We've been building on this. We've been building on that. We've been doing this, doing that. And so you have those who say, well, we've been adding things to it. But don't you know, at a moment's notice, whenever the government get ready to, they can just come in and snatch up all of their little components and leave nothing but their bare basics. This is what we want you to go by. All of this stuff over here, we ain't got time for that now because we have all these children that we got to deal with. Hey, this is it. You get no more. You get nothing else. This is it. But we have written in our laws, this is what we want you to go by. The values that we have, this is what we want you to look at. And they're interpreting them as they go. I'm saying this to you. Whether there's abuse, which I know for certain, I couldn't imagine that the enemy has taken all this time to put things in the hearts of Negroes and for it not to surface during a time like this. So I want you to begin the process of pulling away getting into prayer fasting, and I want you to make your own sociograph. I want you to begin listing all the children that you know. I want you to plaster it up on the wall, and I'm gonna tell you, Miss Teresa knows what she's talking about, okay? Plaster it up on the wall and just start laying hands on it and praying for each child in your sociograph or in your spider graph or whatever you want to call it, who those children are connected to. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, then will I hear the land, says Yahweh. I will hear from heaven and I will heal their land. Make that. I'm going to make one. And I'm going to be that. And I will join you tomorrow. And if you want to see what it looks like, just inbox me. Let me know. I'll be happy to show you. Meanwhile, dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for every person who's hearing the sound of my voice. I pray that you would move by your Spirit and deliver our nation, deliver Israel. Deliver us, Father, in the name of the resurrected Yeshua. Do what only you can do. Father, move by your Spirit. Open our eyes. Open our eyes. Open our eyes. Turn our heart towards you so that we could turn and worship you. That we can seek your face for help. So that you can do for us what only you can do, Yahweh. I pray that you help us. Deliver us in the name of Yeshua. Father, let your will be done in our lives in earth as it is in heaven, in the name of the resurrected Yeshua. I pray today. Thank you for your faithfulness, Father, in Yeshua's name. Hallelujah. Amen. Y'all remember, the Father is faithful. He will give you grace and mercy and might to do whatever you got to do. He will give you the Spirit and might. Also, please remember, find those books. I told you I have chapter 1, and I am offering chapter 1 for a review. Please go to my Facebook page, find the Line Room, and order chapter 1. May God bless you. Thank you much. Take care. Goodbye.